The Gene of Peace, A Journey to a New Humanity in the Year 2045, Dr. Elena Moreau, a leading geneticist renowned for her work on human behavior, made a discovery that would forever change the trajectory of the human race. For years, Elena had been obsessed with one question. Why are humans prone to violence? Wars, conflicts, and acts of aggression had marred the history of civilization, and Elena believed there had to be a biological cause, a genetic link driving this destructive behavior. After years of research, using advanced gene sequencing technologies and artificial intelligence models, she made a breakthrough. She and her team identified a specific cluster of genes in the human genome that seemed to play a key role in violent behavior. This cluster, which they named V37, was found in individuals with higher tendencies toward aggression, impulsivity, and violent outbursts. The weight of discovered implications were profound. Could violence, one of the most complex and destructive elements of human behavior, be traced to a single genetic source? If so, what would happen if it could be switched off? Elena's excitement was tempered by fear. She knew this discovery was just the beginning of a much larger ethical debate. Would removing the capacity for violence strip humanity of something essential? Violence had long been a double-edged sword responsible not only for suffering but also for self-defense, revolutions, and the fight for justice. The question weighed heavily on Elena, but she was determined to pursue the research. With cautious optimism, Elena's team embarked on the next step: gene editing trials. They developed a refined version of CRISPR, a genetic editing tool that could deactivate the V37 gene cluster without altering other aspects of human behavior or physiology. The trials B2050, the first experimental trials began. Volunteers, both adults and prospective parents, signed up to undergo the procedure. The gene editing process, applied to embryos or retroactively in adults, promised to deactivate the cluster linked to violence while leaving the rest of the genome untouched. The initial results were promising. The first generation of A37-free children, born without the predisposition for violent behavior, exhibited remarkable emotional intelligence and peaceful conflict resolution skills. Even in highly competitive or stressful situations, these children remained calm, showing little to no signs of aggression or violent tendencies. Their empathy levels were off the charts. As more families opted for the procedure, Elena's team monitored the children closely. By their teenage years, it was evident that this new generation was fundamentally different from their predecessors. Bullying in schools dropped dramatically, while incidents of physical violence were almost non-existent. Parents noticed how their children avoided confrontations and instead found creative, peaceful solutions to everyday problems. A world transformed by 2070, over 30% of the population had undergone the procedure, and the results began to ripple across society. Governments around the world took notice of the radical reduction in violence, crime, and conflict in regions where the trials had taken place. The UN convened to discuss the potential of making V37 deactivation accessible on a global scale. In 2080, a historic resolution was passed. The technology would be available to all, supported by governments, though not mandatory. Parents from every corner of the world eagerly signed up, driven by the hope of raising children who would never know violence. Over the next 2 decades, the world underwent a transformation unlike any before. The world in 2145, 100 years after the Discovery One. The end of war by 2145, the concept of war was all but forgotten. With violence and aggression genetically eradicated, there was no longer a need for standing armies, weapons manufacturing, or military defense. Countries disbanded their military forces, and the vast resources previously spent on defense were redirected to more productive endeavors like scientific research, education, and healthcare. International disputes that once escalated into armed conflict were now settled through peaceful negotiations, with diplomacy reigning supreme. Nations collaborated on global challenges like climate change, space exploration, and technological advancement without the shadow of war looming over their progress. 2. A crime-free society. the ripple effects on crime were just as dramatic. Violent crime assaults, murders, and armed robberies became rare to the point of extinction. Law enforcement agencies shifted focus from violent crime prevention to managing non-violent issues, such as cybercrime and fraud. Police officers, once tasked with maintaining order in violent communities, now focused on helping citizens resolve conflicts peacefully. Prisons, once overflowing with violent offenders, saw their populations dwindle to a fraction of what they had been. Rehabilitation centers took the place of punitive institutions, helping individuals reintegrate into society. Criminal justice systems worldwide transformed from punishment-based models to restorative justice approaches, emphasizing healing and reconciliation over retribution. 3. A new economy of peace. With it, the drain of violence, economies flourished. Resources previously allocated to defense spending were reallocated to education, healthcare, and social services. Countries formed new trade agreements, no longer driven by competition but by a desire for mutual growth. International corporations focused on ethical practices, driven by the cooperative nature of this new generation of humans. Innovation soared as collaboration across borders and industries became the norm. Technologies once hindered by conflict, such as clean energy solutions and sustainable agriculture, were rapidly developed and deployed, addressing many of the global challenges humanity had faced for centuries. 4. Changes in culture and entertainment. The eradication of violence also transformed culture. Violent entertainment, which had once dominated movies, sports, and video games, lost its appeal. Audiences no longer craved depictions of conflict and bloodshed. Instead, the focus shifted to cooperative, creative, and emotionally rich storytelling. Sports evolved as well. Competitive events became less about physical dominance and more about strategy, skill, and teamwork. New forms of games emerged, emphasizing collaboration and problem-solving over aggression. The world of entertainment shifted its focus to narratives that explored human connection, empathy, and the boundless potential of peaceful coexistence. 5. Emotional evolution. With violence eradicated, human emotional capacity expanded in unexpected ways. Without the underlying biological impulse for aggression, empathy and emotional intelligence became the defining traits of human interaction. People were better equipped to navigate complex emotional landscapes, forging deeper, more meaningful relationships. Mental health also saw an unprecedented transformation. Anxiety, depression, and PTSD, once exacerbated by violence and trauma, decreased dramatically. The absence of violent conflict removed a significant source of psychological stress, allowing individuals to focus on personal growth, creativity, and fulfillment. 6. Governance. Without violence. The end of violence also reshaped political systems. Authoritarian regimes, which had historically relied on violence and coercion to maintain control, were replaced by governments based on consensus and cooperation. Democratic systems thrived, with leaders selected for their ability to foster unity and compassion rather than power. Policies were made with the welfare of the population in mind, as the era of aggression-driven politics had ended. Governments focused on long-term planning, sustainable development, and the well-being of future generations. The ethical debate. Despite the unprecedented success of the gene editing project, there remained a faction of society that felt uneasy about the direction humanity had taken. They questioned whether humans had lost something vital. Aggression, they argued, had driven some of the most significant achievements in history, fighting for freedom, justice, and survival. Without the instinct for aggression, would humanity still have the fire to stand up against injustice or the ambition to push boundaries? Was this peaceful world simply too comfortable? Some worried that in the pursuit of utopia, humanity might have traded away the very qualities that had fueled its progress. Elena Moreau, now regarded as one of the most influential figures in history, reflected on these questions during the final years of her life. She had seen the world change dramatically as a result of her discovery, and while the benefits were clear, she understood the deeper ethical questions would remain. Had humanity lost something essential in its evolution toward peace? But as Elena watched a world free from war, brutality, and senseless violence, she felt a sense of peace. Humanity had chosen a different path, a path of cooperation, compassion, and empathy. The world had evolved, and while the debate over free will and human nature would continue, one fact was undeniable: for the first time in human history, the cycle of violence had been broken. Humanity had rewritten its own destiny, and in doing so, had unlocked a new chapter of potential. The future, at last, belonged to peace.